Good morning and welcome to the Bucksport Community Resilience Committee Bucksport Workshop. It's Saturday, September 14th. This meeting is being held in person and it can also be viewed on local cable channel 1303 or on the internet by accessing bucksportmaine.gov, selecting agendas and minutes, and choosing this meeting and clicking on the video button next to the meeting. Questions or comments may be submitted prior to or during this public workshop by emailing rich.rotella@bucksportmaine.gov or during the meeting by calling 307-8030. Alan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Alan Kratz, and I'm part of the service provider team for the Community Resilience Partnership. And I'm here with Ainsley Morrison, who's a junior at Bowdoin. She is the youth representative on the working group, the Community Resilience Working Group, and the Climate Council. This summer did an internship in the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation and Future. So we're delighted that Ainsley is part of this team. And Debbie Grimmick, who is on the other side of the room, is a longtime friend and co-worker of mine in volunteer work in Brooksville, where we live. Met Debbie on the comprehensive plan committee when we were going through multiple years of that process. And Debbie's part of the service provider team as well here. So happy that you're all here. It sounded like it's a very jovial group, and I guess it's bigger with the sunny day we have here, and we'll move forward so that you can go on and do other things. But it's really important that we're all here today to talk about the Community Resilience Partnership the State of Maine has provided through legislative support and gubernatorial support to help towns address climate change, to address energy efficiency, and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Just this past 2 days ago, the Governor's Office announced a new grant round for funding, no match funding, up to $75,000 for communities. That's a new amount, up to 50, and up to $175,000 for groups of towns that apply together for funding. So that's really good news, and we're excited to see that happen. So to get in position for that funding, there's a 3-step process. You, as your town council, has appointed. Thank you, Mayor, for appointing Tracy and the rest of you here who are on the committee to be the liaison for the program. The committee's first work was to do a self-evaluation, to do basically a diagnostic of what's working, where there's some gaps, what could be done for climate change, energy efficiency, greenhouse gas reduction in this town. And
Alan, can I ask you just to move a little bit closer towards the microphone
Sure.
so the people
Is
at home
this
can hear you? Yep, thank you.
And then the third component is to have a community workshop like this to get a further indication of where the community is moving and wants to move in terms of climate change. And then after this, then the town council will have a resolution that says we want to enroll the town of Bucksport in the Community Resilience Partnership. And once that enrollment is accepted, and that will happen very quickly, that we just submitted the form for the town of Rhode Island 2 days ago. That enrollment will be in place, and we will be, as a town, in position to apply for funding. The grant round was just announced, and there is a deadline of December 17th to
once you've kind of thought about that a little bit, I will have everyone pair off. So if you could find a partner that you didn't necessarily come here with, that would be great. Or if we're feeling antisocial, that's okay too. But you do need a partner, so that is the that is the end all be all. So go ahead and find a partner somewhere in the room, and decide which one of you is going to be partner A and which one is going to be partner B.
also have
Some
coffee and
pens.
donuts.
Oh yes,
so,
well yes, that too. That's not even where I was
please take
thinking.
that into consideration.
Blue, orange, so many options.
Notating anything or just?
You can if you'd like to write a little note, as long as you don't write directly on the maps, then we're good. But write whatever you'd like on the post-it note.
No, no, you're fine.
Does anybody have a color preference?
I'm trying to track this one.
There are two maps too, if you wanna go to the other map.
Do you have a preference?
No. Thank you. That would make your life so much worse.
Thank you. You can have more.
Thank you.
Blue.
Oh, I could
Blue's
actually
probably
put mine there
good.
too. Silver Lake Symbol.
There you go.
I had about 5.
You can have as many sticky notes as you like.
Yeah.
Alright. Alright, Route 1,
Something about the
Silver
Silver
Lake
Lake
section.
Symbol.
Are you Tom? Orchid Mountain. Excellent. County roads, right.
You can if you'd like to make a note. Otherwise,
Ah,
you can just put it off.
my brother is running for
Whatever speaks to Silver Lake.
contact sports whenever I could fit. It's amazing.
Do you take your corgis to Costa Rica?
So much fun.
Well, I mean, it should be fun. One encounter that I laid out for Steve.
They usually put a photo up on PG.
It was a good throw. It was a good toss.
One on each for Silver Lake, just because it's on both maps.
And I go to the firing range every year.
I realize I left without my hearing aids, so I'm gonna double check. These stickies are for what we just talked about as being the important
all of Bucksport, are most of the places that people chose like private property of some kind, like their own property or like a place of a friend's, or is it more municipal owned spaces?
Both private and
Both.
Both.
I was just curious about that.
Mine are municipal entirely.
So, shall we talk about themes now? Do you want me to
Sure.
get into that?
Yeah, sure.
So, as you think about what you put up here, as you think about the needs of Bucksport, or if you prefer, also thinking about the
Can't
needs of
follow
this
them all,
region in
like,
terms of
something.
climate resilience, what is needed? What are the issues? What are the challenges? What would you, as members of the community, would like to see? I know that the committee itself has done some initial thoughts and we'll
I
get to
can't
that.
make head or tails
This
of
would be a good
this.
opportunity
Here.
for you to speak up about what you would like to see here in Bucksport. Is there anything in particular that seems to be a stress point, or a pinch point, or some challenge that you here in Bucksport, yeah?
A challenge?
Yeah, in terms of climate resilience, energy efficiency. Go ahead, Linda.
Well, I was walking up by the cemetery last night, the Oak Hill Cemetery, which looks beautiful, except for they cut trees down there.
Yeah.
The trees probably that Oak Hill was named after.
The oaks.
So, yeah, the oaks. And one of my big concerns here is that there's so many parking lots that suck up heat. And some of the time, those parking lots are empty all day long and used for events. So parking lots, I'm really worried about that and about, we need to plant more trees. If we're gonna get intense heat. I could barely walk. When I first got over here from Orland, I was amazed at how much harder it is to breathe in Bucksport. Because of that heat, from the parking lots, I literally had to crawl from one shade spot to another, going back up the hill to Gardner Commons, because I couldn't breathe. The heat was so intense. So, and how much shade is there? Hardly anything. I went up by way of McLeod, so I went in there, up there, just wherever I could get up to the Congo Church, and I get up there and it'd be, okay, there's a little shade, a little green. I just really would like to see less building, less parking lots, more trees everywhere. Main Street, around the parking lots, they make oxygen, so.
Right, you've raised the issue that I think a number of communities are facing, which is, well, we've all faced it this summer, increasing heat. I can remember the middle of July, it was really pretty unbearable.
It's horrible.
I never thought I'd have to think about air conditioning. But, that's certainly, so, and you're talking also about how important it is for nature-based solutions. You talk about parking lots that really could be paved with pervious pavement that lets water seep into the ground rather just be runoff. So parking lots are a big issue, I think. So thank you for bringing that forward.
Okay.
I saw a lot of nodding heads on that.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to say anything about that? Kathy? No, go
I
ahead.
could just speak to why the trees are not there anymore.
Yeah, please.
The ones in front of Wilson Hall were the big oaks, and they needed to come down. In fact, Mother Nature took 3 or 4 of them down, dropped one of them into the cemetery, did a lot of damage. But investigating, they were all hollow. I mean, they're 160-year-old trees.
Right.
I hate to take trees down, but there's an absolute reason for that. And the ones along the, around the cemetery itself, were actually on the fence line, so they're interfering with the new fence that's going up around the cemetery.
Thank you for that in that.
So is there a plan to replant them? I mean, is there also a
I-
replanting sort of plan?
In front of Wilson Hall, I did replant some, unfortunately, for a reason that I won't disclose, 3 of them died, but I will replant.
Other issues? Emily, please.
I have heard the shade, issue echoed around the playground as
Playground
well.
as well.
Yeah,
Mhm.
for the heat. But I will also say the the plan to revitalize Main Street, does also involve more greenery.
That is part of the plan? Good. Tracy, you're on the council, that, you wanna add anything to that?
No.
Okay.
I don't think it's necessarily like a Bucksport issue, cause I see it all up and down the coast, and I grew up in Brooksville, and
Yep.
it's the same thing happening in Brooksville, but I think just the mindset of not thinking 15 years out or 20 years out is sort of missing, because they're replacing piers, Castine, all up and down the coast where those two storms
Mhm.
took out a lot of structures. But they're building it perhaps 24, 18 inches higher when they replace the piers, which is 3-year thinking or 5-year at most. It's not a long-range planning mindset. And
Right.
that's what I feel is pretty necessary right
Yeah,
now.
there was an article, it got a lot of currency last week in the New York Times last Sunday about Stonington and what the
Yeah.
lobster industry is doing there, and how, you know, wharf owners thought they were well protected, but they weren't.
Yeah.
So you're really, I think, emphasizing
Yeah.
the need for long-term thinking.
But
Paul?
an interesting part of that article was the person, I believe, building redoing his private wharf,
Mhm.
Travis Fifield.
Travis, like
Yeah.
it,
He added a foot and a half.
yes.
So I think the conversation there is if the private people, businesses realize they know what's going on,
Mhm.
they're doing that. Back to your point, then it's time, it really behooves the town of Bucksport, for example, make sure it's doing the same thing when it has to.
Yeah.
I'll just mention that, to that point, yeah, the private sector in some ways, you know, they're the canary in the coal mine. They really have good market reasons for looking at that. And I'll just mention that this coming Wednesday night, the Maine Climate Council is having a listening session in Ellsworth at 6:00. It's available online, and I'm encouraging people to show up in person at the public library there. So that's a really good opportunity to, reiterate this point. I think the council is very much involved in this, very aware of this, and it's probably good for those of us who live in our communities to be there to reinforce that message. So just one thing, and I'll give Rich the link to register for that. You can register, as I say, for online participation or attendance in person. I'm hoping that we will get a good representation from Hancock County there and really show our the value of this. Other comments? What here in Bucksport do you think needs to be done to address climate change or community resilience?
I just thought of something. Since we just added sidewalks on Broadway going down to where the Family Dollar is, we should make Bucksport more walkable. Maybe build new sidewalks on Nicholson Avenue, maybe towards the Orland border, maybe make another sidewalk, and I was thinking another spot, Central Street would be an awesome spot for sidewalks. Just make it a little more walkable, but also make it ADA compliant,
Mhm.
so.
Okay. Good.
It'd also be nice along those walkways, some places, before the trees grow up that we're gonna plant, to have maybe a small sitting place that's shaded.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, along the way, because there's really no benches. There's a lot of old people in this town that walk quite a bit.
Mhm.
And, it would be nice to have little resting places, private places, just to sit. No big deal, just a small,
Thank you. Good. Yes.
I'm gonna be a broken wheel for some resilience things with I'm new to the community a couple years. But in terms of resilience, one of the things that gets me is the pollution. That this looks wonderful and I love it and I walk it every day. But I'm aware of the river, I'm aware of the dams, which I have to say this council did wonderful stuff, putting a stop action in front of it to give yourself some time
Mm-hmm.
to figure about the dams removed
Yep.
and taking over that liability. And I'm worried about the landfill. And the landfill is not just a Bucksport issue, it's all of Maine. places, but not looking at a long-term solution.
In every community I work with, I hear that trash,
Debris
Um,
management.
or the new word is materials management.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, I mean, the Maine Climate Council actually has designated that as one of its top priorities because we know what's happening or not happening up in Orrington and, Juniper Bridge, and that becomes a huge cost for towns, we know that. So how do we do that? How do we do more composting? What are the things that, the town of Stonington was looking at the possibility of using marine food waste, the lobster shells and all of that waste, and combining that with vegetation that's clipped from around people's homes to increase the defensible space for wildfire protection, mixing that together for composting. They didn't get the grant, but I think they'll try again. But I think there's some creative solutions here that have co-benefits when we talk about wildfire protection, waste management, materials management, trash removal, because those are hugely costly issues for towns. I don't need to tell you. Emily.
As a positive, I want to say that I'm really comforted by the fact that Bucksport, a lot of these issues have plans that are already in place to work on these problems, and you don't see a lot of that. And that gives me hope and makes me feel really thankful. And that there are dedicated groups of people here right now, and other efforts. Even, outside of a grant, like we didn't, other communities, this might be the first time they're kind of thinking about these things. So I'm really appreciative of that.
Right, and that was one of the reasons I really wanted, when the possibility came up to be a service provider, I really wanted to work with Bucksport because I knew a lot about what's going on here. I was very impressed with Rich's work as Economic Development Director. I didn't know the council, I didn't know Sue Lassard, but I heard good things about that, and you are very fortunate as a community. So I think the challenge when we think about what Community Action Grant, that's the official name for funding, when we think about that with you, it may be funding that complements, that supplements, that expands, that extends some of these programs already in place. So I think that's where other towns it might be the first step. These grants really are a way of, as Ainsley can mention and as Debbie can mention, and have mentioned in other meetings, this 75,000 really can be the match for something much bigger. It can be really the starting point for a bigger program. So we can be thinking in those terms as well.
And I would just like to add, is it Beck? Is that it? Becca, okay. As Becca was mentioning earlier, this mindset of longer term planning and thinking ahead 10, 15 years in the future as opposed to 3 to 5 year increments is something that is, I think, really valuable when it comes to applying for this grant, because the updated amount of money that is available to fund resilience efforts is a direct result of federal appropriation of these dollars towards the state of Maine, acknowledging that the state and towns and municipalities within the state, this is something that people care about and something that is important and needs to be addressed, especially along the coastline as we're seeing a lot of these damages and impacts of climate change. And so we're in a really unique spot and have a unique opportunity at this moment to be thinking long term, because of this influx of money is, for the most part, at least as of right now, we never know what can happen with changing federal administration, a one-time situation to get this kind of money on such a large scale. There is opportunity within this grant program to apply multiple times, to my understanding. At this point, out of the 500 eligible municipalities across the state, something like 250 are already enrolled, and that number will likely jump significantly after this grant round. So this is a really good opportunity like Becca was mentioning, to be able to think further ahead and recognize that this money may not seem like a lot right now, but it could be a really great investment in a longer term program. And something like reevaluating a debris management plan, or even just using the money to look at how to develop a longer term goal or project is something that is worthwhile and something to keep in mind as well.
That's a very good point. I'm glad you made that, reiterated that point, made that point. Your committee, some of you are already on the committee that was appointed by the council. I think this would be a good time to summarize what the committee has been thinking about and get the input from the wider group. So, Ainsley, I think you've got the, and I'm just going to give a visual prop here. This self-evaluation tool that I think that Rich is probably going to put up on the screen, I mentioned earlier, was the diagnostic. We're now you're getting into now what is prescriptive, what you'd like to see. And this is the list of 72 actions for which state funding is available. I know your committee has seen this, but I'll pass this around and you can take a look at some of these. I printed out these this morning. So, Ainsley.
Yes, so I'll give a little rundown.
I guess so.
So these 72 actions are essentially what communities are given to help narrow down, sorry, I'm looking for a list, narrow down what they would like to focus on in their community. And there are multiple different strategy areas ranging from future of transportation and modernization of buildings, so energy efficiency, to fostering better community, like in-person, person-to-person connections, peer support programs, etc., to rebuilding infrastructure. So there's within 72 actions, there's a really diverse selection of options that the committee has been working with over the past few months now. And the hardest part is just narrowing down priorities, because obviously doing any of these items could be great, but the reason why there's so many is so that individual communities can tailor it to their needs and what they're looking for. So this committee, in working closely with the 72 actions, has highlighted a few, by a few, I'm talking about like 5 to 6 key actions out of the 72 that best represent what they would like to see, so prescriptive, as Alan was saying, in the community, and put this money towards. So F13 is kind of one of the first ones, about identifying public health threats in the community exacerbated by climate change. So as Tom was saying, like pollution, that's a public health threat, for example, that is exacerbated by climate change. F14 and 15 as well was something that came up in conversation a lot. So emergency planning and preparedness in general is definitely a theme in a lot of the conversations that we've had, and not just in Bucksport, but we're also working with Orland and Rhode Island, as Alan mentioned, and those are also have been really key important concepts to those communities as well. And as Alan said in the beginning briefly, there is opportunity within this grant application to essentially like go in with other communities on identified similarities. So there is potential and opportunity between those communities to collaborate in some capacity to get
$175 this time instead of $125,000.
And then F15, as I sort of alluded to, establish peer-to-peer program for checking in on community members. And then if we scroll down to H, is the next strategy area that we've also spent a lot of time looking at. Public awareness and education is something that I think the committee has identified as extremely valuable in terms of climate change impacts. So H2, outright creating the climate change education, outreach and engagement program focusing on mitigation and adaptation for residents and businesses. So thinking about what kind of structures and systems we already have in place to communicate about these issues, how information is spread in moments of an emergency, etc. And then H4 and H5, specifically engaging youth and other populations that are specifically vulnerable to climate. Specifically is not the word I'm looking for, but that are especially vulnerable to climate impacts, and engaging them in conversation, procedural equity, decision making around clean energy, emissions reductions, etc. So those are kind of the big main ideas that we've narrowed down our list to. I will make a note that we've had very wide-ranging conversations. So obviously now is a great time to bring up anything that you feel was not represented in what the committee has selected. I just want to put a little note on that we have talked extensively about other issues that I did not highlight, such as EVs, for example, bulk purchasing, etc. So shelters, yes.
So you've heard Ainsley summarize what the committee has thought about in its multiple meetings. So for the rest of you, how about some feedback? What do you think about this? Some of you are looking at the list, you've seen it up on the board. I understand very quickly. What's your thinking? What's a good focal point for the next step?
Trees. Still need the trees. I didn't see that in here. I'm just gonna have it read off.
Yeah, I think it's in there somewhere, Linda. Perhaps.
Natural
Natural,
one.
natural solutions is definitely. I mean, the difficult part about the 72 actions is that diplomatic answer, that they are written in a very policy way and not necessarily in an implementation way, which I worked on this summer. But that means that it's sometimes confusing to find which action would directly line up with a priority.
But then
that
take a
we
look
have.
at E1. Here, this says set
It's definitely
targets.
Okay, yeah.
Closest one.
So, and again, this 75,000 can be the springboard for a larger program because there are the main Department of Environmental Protection, Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry have tree planting programs, so that could be a wraparound for that. Catherine.
So, I'm a little bit behind, I think. So, what I'm seeing on this is a general guideline for the bigger grant picture. If we have a lot of these strategies in the grant, that would help. I get that. But is this our own community action plan? Is that what I'm?
What we're looking at up here is the same thing that you have.
It's
in front of
exactly the
you.
same thing?
Exactly the same.
Because
yes.
I see there are links to the right. Those are additional resources.
Yeah, so that's outside of this allotted
So
money.
we don't, does Buckport have a committee that is working on this already?
So, Paul, do you want to respond? I mean, the council appointed Tracy and Stephen and Emily and Don and Ralph and a few other people who aren't here today to be the Community Resilience Committee that's been working on this.
Okay.
But of course, there are other committees in town that Paul and Tracy can speak about that are.
That was my answer, but then there are committees that, we have one right now looking specifically, for example, at the waterfront, in terms of short-term and long-term priorities. And I think even when looking at this, I think if I could just add one thing, is we're looking at it and envisioning it coming back to the council. That's gonna help set priorities in the short term and the long term, and it should force us to consider some of these things or the priorities that come back in other projects, for example, the waterfront. And so, I'm getting to the age where I'm, to steal a phrase for considering the planting, just trees, planting the trees that I'm probably not gonna have the benefit of sitting under the shade of. But that's okay, right? Like, I think that's, we kind of keep that in the back of your mind too, as we, I didn't want to talk a lot today, I was here to listen. But that, just in terms of setting that moving forward, remember that the council really, I think, tries to do a good job of not just that 2-3 year
Right.
look, and look forward, but more of a 5, 10, 15. So for example, if you're gonna do something on the waterfront, well, what is that gonna look like in 10 years? Down to the vegetation, so, yeah, that's.
I appreciate that, and but I'll just say that that will make a very competitive proposal and application. The longer, the more forethought is into that, better.
In Paul's talking, just made me also think about that importance for that educational, which I think came from the committee, the piece on education, because not only do you offer an opportunity for people to know more, but you also get some feedback, because I think what's missing is we have Ainsley and we have Emily, but this next generation, what is the priorities of the next generation? We're not hearing from people who are on the skateboard or, park that are using the outdoor spaces. What is that generation? A direct contact, I guess that's what I was
Right,
looking
and
for.
one of the actions that's available is looking, engaging community, engaging youth is
Engaging youth.
So, that might be something to apply for funding for, to develop a plan for gathering that input. And then having an implementation plan based on the feedback. Kathy?
Well, just to go back to my original question about what we've done so far, are we at the beginning stages of thinking and planning? Do we have anything in writing yet? From the committee that we have?
Emily?
Like I said before, we've narrowed down to some things, particularly vulnerable populations, emergency management, and part of that is because there's so many committees and projects already underway addressing a lot of what's on this list, like cleaning up the river, dealing with the waterfront, Main Street, including trees, the playground, a group that protects Silver Lake, a group that, or not a group, but part of municipality for Miles Lane trails, Silver Lake trails. Like, a lot of these entities are already working on a lot of this, and that plays a big role in what we're leaning towards.
So is there a document or a plan or schedule?
Not
Not yet.
quite.
This
Not yet,
this
okay.
process we need to be informed by others as well before that sort of comes alive. We've certainly gotten into the weeds on some projects. A project that really took traction was an emergency warming center or cooling center, and all of the components that play a part in that, including upgraded communication software with the police department, a generator at a new location that's more accessible as an emergency warming and cooling center. Those are sort of more in the weeds things that we've gotten to, but it's important to hear from the rest of the community as well, and then this feedback sort of will breathe life to a more solid, I'm assuming, plan. But this piece is really important because for us to put a plan in place and go down a rabbit hole that the rest of the community writ large is not in favor of doesn't make a lot of sense.
Learning and engagement phase.
Thank you.
I guess one of the things that I'd like to know whether it's possible to work through this idea. You look around, we're all older, most of us, and as you walk the streets, because a lot of people drive, people I see walking the streets are older. There was a comment about, having a tree available for you in the next generation or two. If we don't do some action oriented, and I'm looking forward to the film, on housing, affordable and making people who are employed in the community, and I'm sure this is the topic, but there's a resilience. I mean, you've got a lot of physical resilience going on. If this entity of Bucksport doesn't find a way to attract innovation and attract some more municipal tax base, let me put it that way, and yet make it affordable for those who live here. I'm retired, and I feel really guilty about that. When I first learned about Bucksport was, if you don't have 4 or 5 jobs, you're slack.
I will say that housing is something that we did talk about
Good.
in our conversations.
It may be another whole.
Yeah. And as town councils go, it's interesting, I've been following this around the state, cause I'm on the housing committee somewhere else. And Bucksport's pretty pro-housing comparatively as far as NIMBYism, we've supported the Penquist projects coming through, and any realistic possibility to bring units online, the development, Silver Lake Estates, the one out on Bucks Mills, the one happening at Penquist. As a town, we're supporting others, putting a lot of housing online comparatively, so not that we've solved it, but again, I just wanna bring us back to that sort of where we are comparatively in the housing crisis in Maine. We've got towns in Maine zoning out development just writ large. And so far, at least the last several proposals that have come to council's desks, it's been a really pro-housing environment. Not that we're there, and I'm not, this isn't just to say, let's not address housing, but I think, I don't know where I'm gonna live, so, yeah.
That's the generation.
Yes.
So, I don't know if anybody ever thought about this, but how about tiny houses? You know, like a tiny house village and temporary setup for people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really,
It's a whole issue in itself.
it's like
And
drinking
I-
from a fire
I
hydrant.
will
Yeah.
say that, yeah, exactly. On the state level, there are significant planning and resources that are currently going into attacking this crisis
Yeah.
head
Yeah.
on. That's something that is really important to the current administration and is definitely being researched and problem solved to the best of our abilities.
Yeah.
I mean, the 131st legislature invested more money into housing than we have in the last 3 decades, literally.
I also will say that this summer I met with a lot of young legislators that are coming up in Maine, and are graduates of Union and Colby and Bowdoin and Bates, and have been educated and trained to really think critically about these issues in vulnerable populations. And there are a lot of Representative Riley, anybody, I forget who technically is in state, but is extremely passionate about climate issues, has gone to DC multiple times to advocate for money for Maine Climate Corps, etc. So there's definitely more and more younger people that are moving into Maine state policy in regards to some of these issues, which is really promising to see. Not that it's all that broadcasted,
And
but
another component of housing in relation to climate impact, I think some of the home repair stuff that you're seeing Healthy Communities and Habitat take on has a component of readiness for weather extremes. So people who are vulnerable in houses with drafts coming through, etc., are more can remain housed. So we're not sort of adding to the housing instability piece of our citizens, and that works underway. It's becoming more and more towns are seeing organizations take on that work. It's not organized enough to be sort of a bigger system, but it's effective, and that is directly connected to climate work, because Sherry's not here today, but a lot of that work is insulation or weatherizing and things like that too.
I'll mention that the committee had a very good presentation from Healthy Acadia. Danny, would you like
Yeah.
to add in on that?
And I've seen so many of you in previous meetings, but I'm Danny Robbins and I'm with Healthy Acadia, and we're implementing a project called Strengthen Me, which is happening all across the state. But it provides support for the emotional and social resilience of communities as they do this climate and community-based organizations. Look, there in my slide. To see how communities are tackling this and talking about this, and just amplify some of the work that communities in Hancock and Washington County are already starting. So something that kind of perked my ears up was this idea of bringing youth into this process. I think that's so important. And my counterpart on this project, Sonia Connolly, and I are formulating a curriculum to bring into schools to introduce the idea of resilience to students and engage them in kind of some mock municipal planning. And what one of our teaching artists is calling civic imagination. So we're piloting this in Deer Isle, where high school students are meeting with climate engineers, ecologists, like social workers, to think about how they want to redesign the causeway, because they couldn't get to school when it flooded. So they'll be doing like a whole STEM and emotional literacy project around that this fall. We might also bring that up to Millbridge and collaborate with Women for Healthy Rural Living on a program like that in schools there. So that's totally something that we can bring as a package to Bucksport if working with your youth here is a need that you see. And the nice thing about this grant, I will say, the grant I work under only runs through March. We're working on making it more sustainable than that. But right now we're kind of free manpower, and because we're grant funded, we can provide services to communities for free. So if that kind of support is interesting to you, it seems like it has been, I'd love to keep driving back out here and supporting what you guys want to work on.
Thank you, Dan.
And if anyone would like access to any of this, just let me know. It's in the Google Drive. Anyone that presents or comes here, I save everything. So everything we've discussed as a committee, if I have it, is here on Google Drive, and I can give you access.
Jenny,
Yeah.
have you sent information to the schools here? Do you know?
So not quite yet. We've started in Washington County, not quite in Hancock County, a little bit in Ellsworth. And what Rich is showing is I had a chance to look at the 72 actions about a month ago, and I just highlighted 6 of them that really dovetailed nicely with the Strength in Me actions.
And those were the ones that I listed earlier.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Catherine, I was just going to respond to Catherine's something else. In Orland, a member of their committee, their climate response committee, teaches at the school. So I think Todd would be very interested in this. Have you talked to Todd West, is his name?
Yes.
It's on my list of people to reach out to. I recognize that name.
What?
I recognize that name. Orland actually had the second most insurance claims after Mariahville in the January storms. So it's a deeply impacted community, and you guys share an ecology together. Like you're getting the same wind and rain.
Yep.
Right. Don, you were going to say.
I just, I appreciate totally that there's some energy from youth to get involved and to be a part of all of this, because they're gonna, I'm an old dog, I've lived most of my life, and they need to get involved. One of the voiceless in meetings and things like this, to me, are always the vulnerable, the very poor, and the shut-ins, which every community has a responsibility in it's to pay attention to, because they don't have a voice. They don't have a voice in places like this. A lot of they just are not organized. They're alone. They don't, that kind of thing. So I think every community needs to, as we move forward and think about climate change, think about what we have in place to make sure that all members of the community have an opportunity to get comfort, to get heat, to get food, those kind of things. And I think that's one of the issues that I'm interested in on this committee is to make sure that happens. And we had conversations with Sean Gagan, who has been here, and yesterday I spent some time with Pastor Peter Remick of the United Methodist Church about providing some of that. So I just wanted to get that in before I had to take off and go see my granddaughter play Colby against University of Maine.
Wow.
So, but I wanted to get that in. That's where there's been some energy on the committee to
John,
give.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, and some of us have seen, and I know others have heard about the Maine Social Vulnerability Index that Eileen Bowden, who teaches at Bowden, has been a principal formulator of this index. Actually, it's a planning process that really looks at the socially vulnerable people in our communities. And Eileen has created a PowerPoint for a number of people in the Louisville Peninsula tomorrow, monthly forum, and she worked with social service agencies and gathered them together to look and see what the vulnerabilities were in each town. And it was very interesting to see how gaps showed up. There were some, spoke a little further, I think maybe page 6 or 7. This is the index of a little farther rich. I wanted to get to the point where she did those bar graphs showing how the initial thought of who was vulnerable and who was targeted was changed on the basis of some tabletop exercises here. Who are most vulnerable to a storm? And you see here, before the social services got together and afterward, the perceptions changed. And look how population 65 or older living alone, that just went off the chart. And some populations that hadn't been perceived as being important showed up, like the unemployed, uninsured, underinsured, housing insecurity showed up. So Eileen and her students continue to do this research, and I'm suspecting that if you, either at Bucksport or in conjunction with Orland and Rhode Island, wanted to do a more robust survey of this type, to explore needs here in your towns plural, that could be a very competitive application for that funding, and part of that plan would then be, what do you make of this? What's the implementation? What's the follow-through? So there's more than just a plan, it's actually an implementation action. So I just, we know there's a lot of work going on like this, and we can be part of that here in Bucksport and Rhode Island and Wilton.
This is an interesting thing because in my, when I'm not at this job, in my other job, one of my roles is doing business continuity planning and disaster recovery planning for the department I'm in, and I work at Athena Health in Belfast, which is a corporation, private company. In every exercise we do, in the plan itself, so we plan out, like in this particular scenario, what steps we need to be taking. And in every exercise, the conversation comes back to, even when you're dealing with a private corporation and if something happens, employee morale over the course of an event. Because if morale is impacted, your resiliency is impacted. And so I only highlight that to say that even a private corporation, we all have an image in our head of what a corporation's priorities are, and I'm not saying that's wrong, but I'm saying that we take into account, and it didn't come from me, the morale, the well-being of employees, because when employees, if you do the things that improve morale or keep morale up and make sure their well-being is good,
Who's caring for the caregivers?
Yep.
One thing, I was at a conference yesterday, and I kind of just want to raise up the population 65 and older. So Hancock County has the fastest growing demographic of 65 and older projected within the next 30 years. So it's also, according to this, the most at risk, right? So the most at risk category also will be growing exponentially comparatively to other age groups. So it's just something for us really to keep an eye on. We've kind of got dueling things happening.
I was in a meeting yesterday where somebody said the biggest challenge is going to be ambulance services because we have an aging population. How do we deal with ambulance service? First responder type of thing. So.
Well, we're all not 20, I mean, don't discount old people because they know a lot.
No, I'm in that age
Still,
category.
things
but
happen.
Things happen.
Awesome. If I can add, thinking about ways that we think about well-being for people, programs like opportunities for people to get together on a regular basis are really important. An example is the GRACE program that we have going at Elm Street Church every week. Brings together people who just want to explore art, for example. So we just gather every week, and that group has been going on for 5 years, and we have become this core group of people that are very, we're good friends at this point, and we're there for each other, and we're having art shows, we're supporting each other in different ways. It's not an instructional time, it is really a sharing time. And so those kinds of programs are something that I think are extremely important to think about. The arts really make a big difference in people's lives, so I want to just put that out there as a reminder not to.
Yeah, thank you for that wonderful example of social resilience. That's true.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I feel like, and forgive me, my comment wasn't that older people aren't engaged in life. But my comment is really, there is not a single aged care facility in Hancock County now, not one. There's about to be none in Washington County. So we just don't have an infrastructure for emergency climate resilience already, and with a demographic, with a population shift that is predicted, and if our plan for resilience is supposed to be projecting forward 30 years, we just have to take that into consideration.
Debbie, please.
I just wanted to point out what I thought was very important about Eileen's presentation on social vulnerability. She really looked at what happens during the storm, the immediate, aftermath, protecting people. But she also looked at those populations who are vulnerable 6 months out, during that whole recovery period, and discovered people who might have weathered things pretty well during the storm really were at the end of their resources after 6 months if resources did not kick in for them. So that I thought was just really a critical piece of looking at social vulnerability.
And our committee used, when it came up with a lot of the ideas, the Ice Storm of '98, something that's relevant to all of us in this room, as an example of not being able to reach those people who did not drive, did not have any means of communication. How long do they have to go without the power? So that's part of the reason why the committee selected some of the items that it did.
That's what makes people tough, though, because I went through that out in my little shack out there at the Storeless.
You're a survivor.
You had wood stoves, you had wood heat, and you had friends, and you had nature around you.
You had water.
People, you had water, and all that stuff. And that's what toughness is that you learn to take care of yourself, whether you have food sometimes or not, which I never ran out of food. But you know what I'm saying? It's like people are resilient in themselves when they have to be a lot of times.
Yeah.
Until you have to be like that all the time.
It's interesting, somebody at the conference yesterday said rugged individuality, is that what it is a myth.
Is a myth?
Yeah, that we do need each other. We do need community
Oh, I'm not
supports.
saying that. I'm
Yeah,
not saying
yeah.
that at all. I'm just saying that when you're in a situation like that, you use the resources you have. We were never cold because we had wood heat.
And what I
Which
observed
is
is
right.
people use those resources for themselves and help other people.
Yeah, of course we would.
So I'd like to sort of draw a through line here. I think that I see 3 themes here, and I think that the next step is going to be for your committee to meet and process what we've heard today. Debbie is a superb note taker. It's almost like a transcript. So we'll have that as a basis. You know Becca from having known Debbie in Brooksville. So we'll use that as, we'll find a date for the committee to meet, process what we've heard this morning. And then suggest what the priorities would be for the town resolution, because that's one thing I mentioned. There will be a resolution that comes before your town council asking the state to enroll Bucksport in the program. And that resolution will list a set of 3 or 4 priorities. They're not high. And those then will be the basis for looking at grant funding. And again, the 75,000, 175,000, if it's 3 towns together, is not the only funding that the town can look for. It can be wraparound, it can be springboard funding, match funding for other programs. That's sort of the funding strategy that I like to do. More business funding strategy, putting those pieces together, stacking things together. So we'll work on that together as a committee. And this, I think, has been a really helpful broadening of the discussion, focusing on some details, encouraging us to look in different ways. So I don't know if any members of the committee would like to supplement what I've said, but feel free to do that. And I think this is a good wrap up, and we can then get on to do some other things. I know there's a lot going on here today. There's Orland River Day, and it's a good day for walking. So Emily or Tracy, would you like to add in, or Ralph, anything to what I've said? And reflection on what we've heard this morning.
Can I ask a
Yeah,
question?
go ahead.
So the next step for the committee is to narrow this down, just to get ready for the
Enrollment resolution.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, that's the process. You got it. Emily.
I've taken some notes on some key takeaways, and that I think really kind of fit the direction that we're heading in.
Okay, good. Well, Rich will poll us for a convenient date, probably one of the first 2 weeks of October, and then we'll make sure that we get a resolution done. Your council meets on the 2nd and 4th Thursdays of the month, I think, so I think we'll probably have a resolution. The committee will be ready to come to the council the 4th Tuesday of October.
Thursday, 4th Thursday.
4th Thursday.
Yep.
Yes.
You got it.
And then the enrollment will happen right away after that, and then we can simultaneously be thinking about grant funding. Does that work for everybody? Good. Any further thoughts from anyone? If not, there's plenty of coffee, food, there's donuts. Please take it.
Otherwise, it's coming back to school.
Thank you all for
Thank you for showing up.
Thank you, everyone, for showing up today. This concludes the presentation. Again, the emails will be on the list, and if I don't have you already, I'll invite you to the Google Drive so you can see everything that the committee's done, any of the documents that have been shared. So thank you again.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.